You're listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is Tarun Verma, and we're going to be talking about his new film. He's the director, writer, and producer of this new film called Conception. Welcome to the show, Tarun.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Great, good. It's good to have you here. This isn't, a topic that's rather timely. It's unfortunately, it's something. I almost feel like it's a pandemic of its own. Uh, it seems lately. Let's talk about conception and what this film is about, so our listeners know what Conception's about, and then we can do a deep dive into it.
Absolutely. So, this is a couple's journey through pregnancy and more specifically IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. That's what couples have to go through if they cannot have a child naturally. They have to go through this process to have a child. And this movie kind of looks at the emotional toll that can take on a couple. And yeah. So that's it.
Yeah, it does take an emotional toll. How did you come about? You wrote this and you directed it and you produced it. So, how did the idea germinate for you? How did this come about?
Got it. So for many years, so I by classical training, I am a pharmacist. That's my education, that's my background. For many years, I was a fertility pharmacist. So I worked with these patients. These women would come in month after month getting medications from me, and like any good pharmacist should, you ask questions. And also, my patients would ask me questions. Well, Tarun, what about this? What about that? Can this help create a better outcome? Because these patients want nothing more than to have a kid. They'll do whatever it takes. They are, we kind of have a joke in the pharmacy world where the common patient doesn't even know what they're taking. They don't know why they're taking it. They just know their doctor prescribed them a purple pill or a green pill for their hypertension, for their high blood pressure, and that's it. They don't even know what it's for. They're like, yeah, I take a green pill and it keeps my blood pressure good. But fertility patients are so focused and honed in because this is a big deal for them, you
Mhm.
know. So anything that they can do. I mean, if they read anything on the internet, I'd get a question about it. I get a call about it. Hey, Tarun, I saw this product that might help with fertility. What do you think of it? And I'd go look it up and things like that. The pharmacist always becomes that person you go to outside of the doctor. You can't go call your doctor for every little thing. Doctors don't pick up the phone like that, but pharmacists we do. So we're that community boots on the ground, as they say. And so people would come in month after month and ask me questions about their medications, about other things that could take vitamins, massages, anything out there that's related to the fertility field. And so it really hit home to me to see how hard these couples were trying to have a child. And it's not even just the woman. The woman, I think, bears the worst of it because she's the one pumping her body full of hormones. And from a uh, physical side, she bears all of the stress there. Now, both individuals bear the emotional weight of what fertility goes through. And I always knew as a filmmaker there was a film to be made about this. And I'm a comedy writer, ironically enough, if you can believe that. I don't generally do dramas. This is actually my first drama that I've ever written and I've ever made. Um, Mostly because that's kind of how I keep myself in balance. My day-to-day job is very serious. It's very, it's not fun per se. It's very, very serious. And then so when I do comedy writing, that kind of helps offset me a bit. But I knew there was a story here, something that would be true. I wasn't seeing films being made about this out there. And the pandemic was a perfect time for when the world just slowed down for me to visit this and say, hey, let me try to crack this story and see if I can figure it out. So I know that was a bit of a long-winded answer,
No,
but we got there. We got
great.
there.
No, I love it. You can, I love it when my guests talk, and that's what it's about. Um, I just want to go back though. I never heard anything the word before about a fertility pharmacist. I didn't even know there was such a specialty. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did you get into that? And is this a common type of pharmacy? A pharmacist nowadays is a fertility pharmacist?
Not really, not per se. Like you don't go through any additional training. It's just sort of the area that you get into. Like I call it fertility pharmacist because it's just the easier way to sum it up. But that became a very hyper focused niche that I was in. So there are certain pharmacies that do cater to the fertility crowd. It's not like your average CVS or Walgreens can do it, mainly because the price of these medications are so high. And so access of these drugs is kind of restricted to certain pharmacies. And so the one I was with was dealing really heavily in this population base. And so I sort of found myself becoming an expert in fertility medications just because I would sit across from the doctors because I would have questions about the medications. I would go visit their offices. My patients actually forced me to research a lot of stuff out there about fertility that I wanted to be a good pharmacist. So I kept getting these same questions again and again. And it was like, it would only behoove me to go and actually figure out answers for them. That's what a good pharmacist would do. And that's what I did. And so I call it being a fertility pharmacist. It's not like an official thing out there. You could be a nuclear pharmacist, you could be whatever. These are just kind of titles, but it's sort of the little niche pocket that you find yourself in where you're predominantly working with that patient base. So
Fascinating. I mean, just the sort of very interesting. And the fact that you uh, cared so deeply that you would go visit the doctors and find out and get the answers so you could be really knowledgeable when you talk to your patients. I mean, that's wonderful in itself. Everybody would love to have you as their pharmacist, I'm sure, given that expertise. So, well, let's talk about the film. Let's talk about the couple in the film and their struggles, and let's talk about that a little bit deeper. You how did the cast come about? You said you did this did you film it during the height of COVID, or did you just write it during COVID?
no, no, no. So 2020, I wrote it and we filmed a portion of it in the summer of 2020. And then, because originally it started off as a short film, ironically enough. And so, we had to, and this was during the height of the lockdown. So we could not bring out talent from outside of the city. We had to literally only look inwards. So I was scouring the city looking for actors because Houston's not a huge acting base out here. Austin is, but people were still very weary at that time to even travel outside then. So I wrote this short film, and that's what Conception was, and we made it, and all in the year of 2020, we found local actors. Kareem, who plays Vic, fantastic job. I've worked with him previously. Him and I both are comedy guys. He's we've always done comedies together. Simran was a new find for me, and she came in and just did a very very wonderful job. She brought a lot of gravitas to that character, and really the it just it takes you. She was really able to take that character into a dark place, which is where you really needed to go to really get the full range of what happens to a couple when they go through this. And then what happened was, once the film was done, it turned out to be about 44 minutes, I think, the short film. That's not a short film.
Mhm. No, it's not.
So
No.
so I had a lot of film festival directors tell me, I would start submitting it and they would go, Tarun, you made something really great here. I can't accept this because this is too long. The whole point of short films is to showcase filmmakers. In the 45 minutes that we can showcase your film, I can showcase about 6 or 7 other filmmakers in that time, and that's what film festivals have to do. There's a and they're restricted on time.
Right.
So one of them told me something, and the minute they told it to me, it clicked in my head, which was, you don't have a short, you have half a movie finished. And I went, oh my God, you're so right. So I started pitching it to investment groups left and right. And within the first month of me pitching it, I got a group to come in and go, here's a check, go finish the film tour. You did a fantastic job. And so I got that authorization, I think February or March of 2021. We went right back into production because while we were in post, I finished the story because I always kind of knew it wasn't done, you know. And so just by the off chance, I don't know how long it would take to finish the film. I wrote that thing while we were in post on the short. Well, sure enough, a couple months later, we got the money. And so summer of 2021, we went right back into production and we finished the entire film.
Amazing, amazing. It's very good
Yeah.
that you got the funding so quickly too to finish it.
I think it goes to your point, just like you said. I think this hits home with a lot of people. This is a very, very relevant topic. We're not talking about um, a serial killer in a clown mask or something, something different that you have to pitch to people. This is a very human story. And I think this really pulls on your heartstrings. So it wasn't very hard to get people to co sign on this, especially if you have children of your own. Um, it hits home. I
Yeah.
think people really gravitate to it.
Why, I don't know if you can answer this question, but it just seems like there's an epidemic of infertility going on, as I said earlier, a pandemic and an epidemic. It just seems like so many women and couples are having such a difficult time becoming pregnant. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts as to why? I mean, I don't know if it's, or what's in our air, the foods people are eating. It just seems like it's more and more prevalent than it's ever been. Is that your perception also, or am I just imagining that?
No, 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 you are spot on. You said it at best as an epidemic. It is. And this is something that I think maybe my movie was a little too soon on. I think if I were to have made this movie 5 years from now, I think it would garner far more discussion than it is now. That is exactly what's going on. Fertility rates have risen through the roof. Now, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've normalized the discussion around it. A lot more people are talking about infertility more than they ever have because it's always existed in our society. We just always kept it hush hush, depending on different, um, you know, groups. And so I think that's there. Beyond that, you are absolutely right. And to me personally, I've talked to a lot of doctors about this. It's a little bit of everything. It's our diet, it's the stress in our lives. It's not particularly the air, but everything else. It's so much of our food is so overly processed. We don't eat whole foods anymore. The water now is more tainted than it's ever been. The tap water isn't clean in almost any city anymore. Um, I'm talking to you on a phone. This phone is as powerful as the first computer my father got me in 1995. You know what I mean? And now we're keeping that phone, something highly radioactive and with radio waves in our pockets near our reproductive organs. That imagine putting a microwave next to you like that. Like it all adds to it. Our society is not conducive to a stress free life anymore. We are very much on the go. We're chugging tons of coffee. It all contributes to it. And I've noticed it doesn't hit one demographic more than the other. I've seen women as young as 26, 25 come into my pharmacy with fertility issues all the way up to 40, which obviously, women around at any time after 35, you have a more complicated pregnancy. And it's harder to get pregnant then. But I mean, I'm talking about people in their 20s, mid 20s are having trouble getting pregnant. It is a very, very big thing. And I don't think we're talking about it enough. But I think 5 to 7 years we will.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. You're right. Yeah, I mean, women who are older, it is more difficult, obviously, to get pregnant, and
Mm-hmm.
and because everyone is delaying, women are going, pursuing their careers, getting married later. They're not, and then they decide finally to have a child, and you're right, they're
Mm-hmm.
in their late 30s, early 40s, which makes that process even more difficult. Or they've been on birth control for a long, long time too. I think that's also contributed to it because you talk about that a little bit in this movie, being on the pill and how that affects your body. I mean, obviously, it's telling the body not to get pregnant. You hear stories where people go off the pill and they get pregnant right away, and but many more are not getting pregnant because the body.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hormones. It's ultimately birth control is hormones. We are manipulating the hormone cycle of a woman to not be fertile for so long. So let's say a typical girl, starts birth control nowadays right around 15. A lot of times it helps with acne. So generally, when that acne phase starts, they tend to give girls birth control. And so it's kind of works both ways. It works with the acne part and the birth control part. Now imagine that woman goes on to become a doctor or whatever, right? She's going to be pretty much on birth control through her whole 20s. Doctors don't become doctors until their 30s. So almost double her life will go by being on these hormones. And so when she tries to get pregnant, go figure that you would have fertility issues. But you're right. At the same time, you do have cases where the first month off birth control, women get pregnant. That happens too all the time. But it's not natural for us to constantly be manipulating our body cycles like that.
Yeah. I love the arc that you created in this film, from the beginning of this couple's relationship. And I don't want to give anything away, but I thought that was, so we could really get involved in their lives and in their struggle. Let's talk about that a little bit without, again, we don't want to give anything away as far as the ending of the film, but as much as you can as far as their
Oh,
arc.
absolutely. Well, you need to be invested in this couple. The film ends in a way where it's quite unpredictable for a lot of people, and so you need to be invested in this couple. And the thing is, I wanted to be very, very honest about what couples go through. So in the beginning, it is fun. Trying to get pregnant is fun. Having these discussions about when to have children is fun. So I wanted to show this couple before any of that starts, really to get a baseline of who they were. They're in love, they're great, you know. And then as you descend, it doesn't happen overnight where you start having problems. I mean, these things are a slow burn. I mean, so I wanted to show them kind of have some issues on their way down. And so it's all just real. And I have had a lot of couples who've gone through IVF who watch this movie and they go, this is pretty spot on. Like this is very, very spot on for what me and what my husband and I went through. And at the same time, you can't have a full movie where it's all depressing and sad. Hence why there's a good chunk of the movie that is very light and funny. And that gets back to my earlier roots of being a comedy writer. That stuff's very easy to write. Um, and then so it just makes you hurt that much more when you see sort of the end half of the movie unravel when their marriage unravels. um but yeah, the whole point was just to be very honest to that journey.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting. Um the, so the actors that you have in this film, talk a little bit about their chemistry. I mean, you knew the lead actor, you knew, and then lead actress you had not worked with before. So let's talk about their chemistry in this film.
Well, that was the great thing about the pandemic, and I know that sounds horrible, and I heard it when I said it out loud. It's not great that the pandemic happened, but one of the side effects of the pandemic is we all had a lot more time, and everybody else had a lot more time. And so, um, when I found these two actors, there was no hurry for us to go shoot this film. I mean, the whole world was literally just sitting around watching TV, just trying to figure out what was happening. A lot of us young people don't didn't want to do that. So I said, "Hey, we got a movie. Let's work on it." Both of them said that's great. Now, both of them have never been married, do not have kids, and currently, like, I don't think they were even in serious relationships at the time. So they had no connection to the material. So I was like, let's take this time and let's over rehearse this film. Let's really go through this. I mean, we would workshop this. They would come over every weekend. We'd sit at my dinner table and we would just run lines. And they would ask questions, especially Simran. Simran's a like a 24, 25-year-old girl. I mean, for her to portray the emotions of a woman in her early 30s going through IVF trouble, it's just not something she could really connect to. But through enough conversations with me, I led her down that path of going, this is how she's going to feel here. This is how a woman would feel here. I need you to internalize that and make that your own. And so we were able to really rehearse a lot. I think that if we were to try to attempt to do this now with the world being open again, I think it'd be harder because everyone just has so much going on in their lives. They don't have time to take aside this much time and just work on the script. But these two actors, it's a testament to how hard they work because they didn't have the resume that screamed that they could pull something like this off. And so I think this was a huge level up for these actors to after all the rehearsals, all of the training they went through, and what they were able to pull off on screen. I mean, hands down, this is the best piece of work I've seen them do for their careers. So I'm very happy that I get to, that they did that for my film. So
Yes, that's great. That's great. It really is. So you mentioned Houston. Is that where you are? Is that where you filmed this?
Correct. Yes, that's right. Houston, Texas.
All right, great, great city. I was wondering where you had filmed this. Other than the challenge, well, filming during the pandemic, what was the biggest challenge that you had when you were making this film?
I think it was the changing in tones. That was something that, when I wrote this thing and it goes from this sort of happy rom com to this very deadpan serious drama, I've seen directors far more experienced than me mess that up. And for some reason, I felt the need to want to try that because I don't know. I could have probably kept this movie more even keeled in terms of its tone, but I went, no, I want to do something as crazy as go from a rom com to go down to that drama. And so each and every way, I think that was nerve wracking for me to constantly go, okay, tonally, are we okay? It shouldn't feel jagged as the movie progresses, but luckily from enough people have said that they felt like it was a very smooth progress to the film, but that was one thing that I thought was incredibly difficult because I think that's just a very hard filmmaking aspect to pull off. um so yeah, I think we pulled it off, to be honest.
You did, you definitely did. That's what I said about the arc. It was,
Yeah,
it is smooth and it isn't, a good arc. It didn't feel like it was, going all over the
chalk.
jagged.
Yeah, jumpy and chalky.
Yeah, not at all, not at all. So I felt that that worked. How was directing this compared to what you've done in the past? Because you said you've done comedy in the past. How does the style change from, and this does have some comedy and lightness into it, as you said too.
Yeah.
How does your style as a director change from genre to genre?
Well, ultimately you have to look at your story and go, what am I trying to say? And so ultimately, when you're making a comedy, it's all about getting that laugh. It's not so much the story, it's not so much you're highlighting this amazing plot twist or anything. It's the jokes. This one, there's no joke, there's no punchline here. And so what it was every single scene has to connect to the next one in terms of its smoothness. Again, it's that arc we're talking about again. It can't feel jagged because then it would pull the audience out of it. And again, you're telling a very specific type of story here. This is not a story that everyone understands. So you had to also make this digestible. I mean, there's a lot of medical stuff that I left out of there because it would have been too much for the average population. They would have been like, you're losing me with all of this medical mumbo jumbo. Um, but I mean, with a comedy, I will admit it's a lot more fun to do those because on set it's just so much fun. You give your actors room to riff and improv, and there's no improv in drama. There really isn't. Everything is very structured. We knew exactly what, especially since we over rehearsed this thing with the actors, we knew what we were going to get. We knew what we had to achieve with each shot that we needed to get into. So the shoot was a lot easier. It was very quick because we knew what we were trying to achieve. With comedy, sometimes you can go off the rails. I hear some of these stories where Adam McKay and Jonah Hill will make a movie and they'll spend a whole day on one scene because they're just improving and they're having so much fun that they're going to go, this is it. This is what we're going to do all day. We're just going to improv this one scene. And with dramas, that's not what it is. So I think with the directorial styles, that's the one thing I learned early on was I can't think like a comedy director going into this drama. I have to constantly be focused on what is my agenda. I'm not making people laugh, so I need people to feel these characters and understand the story. That's it. Those are my only two objectives with this movie.
Do you think what do you think what do you want people to walk away with after they watch this film?
I I think the number one most important thing is I think you should communicate with your partner. And this we're talking even before marriage, even when you're dating, um, you're on the verge of getting married or you're newly married. Make sure you've talked about children because this can become a non-negotiable later on in your life and you don't realize that. Or maybe a girl is just so shy to ask the guy what he thinks about kids, so they don't and they just keep going on their relationship. That's one of the worst things you can do because if you have that discussion early on and you know that kids are something that means something to one of you, but it doesn't mean that to the other person, it's better you get that out of the way right now. Because now that I've been in the place that I've been, I've seen marriages fall apart due to this topic alone, and, you know, I've seen marriages fall apart for a myriad of reasons, but this is the one thing that I feel like a good conversation could fix. I've seen marriages fall apart due to money issues, not being on the same page with money and things like that. But when it comes to children, you can talk about this. You can say, hey, I don't care to have kids, um, but if you do, I will have kids. Or what if we can't have children? What would we do? How does that impact you versus me? Um, I know my wife and I talked about that. My wife said, if we can't have kids, she goes, I'd be willing to, she wasn't willing to adopt or do surrogacy or any of those things. I did. I was open to that. I was like, I wouldn't mind adopting. I think you need to have these conversations. So if that, hopefully people start doing that, because I think that would save a lot of grief, and I think that would save a lot of relationships in the long run.
Great advice, definitely, and great message. Oh, Tarun, so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find Conception? Where can they watch it?
Currently, it is on any video on demand platform. So AT&T, Comcast, Xfinity. If you have a cable box, you will be able to access this film. If you do not have a cable box of any kind, Apple TV, iTunes, Amazon Prime, it's on all the streaming platforms right now. Go rent it, go check it out. It's a doozy. So keep some tissues around when you do though.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I wish you much success with Conception. Thank you so much, Tarun, for being on the show.
Thank you so much.